Okay, we're going to talk termination of covenants, servitudes, and easement. A real covenant, an equitable servitude, and an easement can be terminated in 6 ways. Okay, a real covenant, an equitable servitude have 6 ways in common that they can be terminated. So they spell out ARMPC, ARMPCC. These will terminate a real covenant, an equitable servitude, and an easement. A is for abandonment. The holder of the right intends to terminate the covenant, the servitude, or the easement, and makes an affirmative act in furtherance of doing so. Real covenant, equitable servitude, easement terminates them all. Abandonment, there's an intent to terminate and an affirmative act in furtherance. R for release. This is easy. You get a release in writing that complies with the statute of frauds signed by the party against whom enforcement is sought. That's a release. Easy. Merger, the M. Title to both properties is conveyed to the same owner. This terminates all 3. Condemnation by the government's eminent domain powers. And finally, changed circumstances. A change that affects all the parcels. The purpose of the easement, the servitude, or the covenant can no longer be fulfilled. The purpose no longer exists. Okay, a real covenant, an equitable servitude, and an easement can all be terminated by ARMPC. A for abandonment, intent plus affirmative act. R for release, a writing in conformance with the statute of frauds. M for merger, title to both properties conveyed to the same owner. P for prescription, the right holder fails to protect their interest for the statutory period. C for condemnation by eminent domain, and C for changed circumstances, a substantial change that affects all benefited parcels such that the reason no longer exists and the purpose can't be fulfilled. Okay, the only 2 here that are a little bit fuzzy are prescription. When the holder of a real covenant, an equitable servitude, or an easement, this means the dominant estate holder fails to protect their interest for the statutory period, the covenant, the servitude, the easement will terminate. Changed circumstances. The purpose of the covenant, the purpose of the servitude, the purpose of the easement doesn't exist anymore or can't be fulfilled. And of course, abandonment is intent to terminate, affirmative act in furtherance. So A for abandonment, R for release, M for merger, P for prescription, C for condemnation, C for changed circumstances. This terminates all real covenant, equitable servitude, easement. Okay, there are 4 more methods to terminate an easement. These 4 just terminate an easement, and they spell out the word need. Need. Necessity ends. It's equitable by estoppel and by destruction of the servient land. Okay, these need terminate only an easement. Need terminates only an easement. When the necessity ends, okay, when does an easement by necessity end? When it's no longer landlocked. So the N, necessity ends, is only for easements by necessity. When the necessity ends, parcel is no longer landlocked, terminates the easement. E for equitable. Okay, this is only for easements created by estoppel, where enforcement, it's no longer equitable. If it's created by estoppel, that's an equitable creation. So when it's no longer equitable to enforce the easement can be terminated. Okay, E for estoppel. The dominant estate holder, remember, the dominant estate holder benefits from the easement. The dominant estate holder says something, makes a statement, or does something, conduct, that causes the servient landowner, the parcel that's burdened with the easement, to believe that the easement has been abandoned, and the servient estate holder relies on that to his detriment. Okay, we're going to come back to that, but that's the E, the second E for need. And then D is destruction of the servient estate. The servient estate, why would that terminate an easement? Because the servient estate is the land on which the easement is located. The land on which the easement is located, if it is destroyed, that will terminate the easement. Okay, when does this occur? One situation and only one, and is when the easement is tied directly to a structure on the property. It is almost impossible to just destroy land. So for destruction of the servient estate, it would be when the barn burns down. Okay, terminate easements by ARM-PCC and need. Need stands for if necessity, necessity ends. Equitable, if created by estoppel, no longer equitable. Estoppel will terminate an easement when the dominant estate holder makes, that's right, statements or does something, conduct, that causes the, which landowner? The servient landowner to believe the easement has been abandoned. What does this mean? The dominant estate holder says something or does something that looks like he intends to terminate the easement, and he makes some affirmative act in furtherance. The dominant estate holder intends to terminate the easement, he makes an affirmative act in furtherance. The servient landowner relies on that to his detriment. And then finally, destruction of a structure on the servient estate. If the easement's tied to the structure is destroyed, that will terminate the easement. Okay, ARM-PC terminates all three. Abandonment, intent, affirmative act. Express release in writing, that's the R. M for merger of both properties. Prescription, fail to protect their interest for the statutory period. Changed circumstances, such that the reason for the easement, covenant, or servitude doesn't exist, purpose has been fulfilled. And then what terminates easements? Only need. Necessity ends. If it's created by estoppel, it's equitable. That's the E. Second is estoppel. The dominant estate holder intends to terminate the easement, and he makes an affirmative act in furtherance, otherwise known as he makes statements or conduct that causes the servient landowner to believe the easement has been abandoned. And what's step two? Yes, it's estoppel. The servient estate holder relies on it to his detriment. And finally, the D, destruction of the servient estate, if we're talking about the easement being tied to a structure like a barn, and that's termination.